Good evening. Welcome to MUFON Los Angeles. My name is Steve Murillo. I am the State Section Director for MUFON LA. Tonight we have a great presentation. Douglas Taylor is going to talk to us about the Soulic journey of a UFO experiencer. Douglas Taylor is a multi-talented artist, author, lecturer, teacher, and a woodworker, and he's also a UFO experiencer. During much of his youth, Douglas was a surfer traveling around the world, his only concern to find that elusive perfect wave. Through his search, though his search never yielded the wave of his dreams, his travels stimulated his adventurous spirit, and he developed a profound appreciation of nature and its healing and rejuvenating effects in his life. That set the stage for a life-changing event. In 1978, on one of his surfing trips in the Caribbean off Puerto Rico, he experienced an incredible psychic encounter inside a UFO and telepathically communicated with an extraterrestrial. On his return from this trip, Douglas began having many strange and wonderful psychic experiences that profoundly changed his life. He felt a door had opened to the next step in his spiritual progression. Douglas began writing and painting without having any previous creative or artistic background. He sold 14 paintings at his very first art showing. Over the years, aided by hundreds of beautiful communications and visions and dreams with extraterrestrials and celestial beings, Douglas continues to share his inspirational writing, painting, and teaching with those he meets. Please give a warm welcome for Doug Taylor. Where are you, Doug? Come on up. That's a safe way to go. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to come out and speak today. And obviously, MUFON, I think, has a tremendous reputation as being a very respected and time-tested organization of researchers and individuals who are deeply involved in trying to understand what this UFO phenomenon is, how it is affecting the lives of the people on our planet, and hopefully even more important than that, how we can change the very nature of our own lives by becoming open to the concept and understanding that we are being visited by individuals who are coming from other planets, other star systems. I make my living as a carpenter. This is not an art show. It might look like one. But for the most part, I'll get directly into the experience that I had back in 1978 and kind of describe it in a way that will clarify in my own mind anyway that this particular experience kind of catapulted me into a realm of reality that did not go along with what I had believed to have been reality up to that point. In other words, it was beyond my own perception of what reality could be. I'm a very skeptical-minded person. You can speak to my wife, Serena. She'll verify that. She's always such a unique believer, I guess you could so say, in the... Basically, she believes everything till it's proven that it isn't true. That hasn't been the case with me. I'm kind of like the Scully of the Mulder and Scully combination, and you know, and being a Scully, it's like I want to see the evidence. Where are the facts? You know, what can prove that this is valid beyond a shadow of a doubt, so that it's just not some pie in the sky. So with that said, I'm going to say some totally outrageous things that are going to go completely in opposition to what I just said there, because I think experience is the most validating belief and proof that we have had something that has expanded our understanding of life. That experience really gives us something to grasp in a way that our mind begins to open and expand to something larger than what we had thought up to that point could possibly be real. So this experience that began my own so-called research into the UFO phenomenon happened on the island of Puerto Rico in 1978. I was on the northwestern end of Puerto Rico in a little village called Rincon. And at that time, it was just a tiny little enclave of little huts up on the hills. Just very, very humble people who lived very simply. They had chickens and, farm animals and things running around in the yards. And as I've gone back there, I hadn't been back actually in 30 years. I went back in 2005, me and Serena both. And lo and behold, all those humble little shacks were gone, and all there were million-dollar mansions up on the hills. Because it's a beautiful area, and people took advantage of the fact that it had a certain paradise feel to it. It was just such a beautiful little area. But it's right off the deepest part of the Atlantic Ocean called the Puerto Rican Trench. And so what we were just seeing about the USOs is something that is very, very much a part of the experience of the people on this island. Speak about it all the time. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jorge Martin. I think Serena had spoke about him a little bit, but he's a researcher in Puerto Rico, and he has incredible evidence over the past 15 years of different individuals who have seen these craft going in and out of the water. In my experience, I didn't see them going in and out of the water. But basically, I had been very deeply in the, I'd say, research of my own mind, my own thoughts, realizing now that everything comes to us as waveform energies. Everything. Light waves, sound waves. We create the reality that we experience and observe through these waveform energies. So in a sense, it's almost like we're seeing and feeling and experiencing something of an illusion, because we're recreating these particular waveforms into the reality that we exist in. And so I began to have experiences where I was being projected out of my body back when I was like 19 in sleep state. And so these experiences obviously are something that are very well known, but it was fascinating to me in that one experience I actually was projected out of my body, rose up several feet above the bed, turned over and saw my body laying on the bed. So at that point in time, I knew for a fact that the physical body was simply a sort of a vehicle that we're utilizing or we're using to gain experience in this world. For what purpose? Well, hopefully I'll be able to describe some of that and make it interesting as we go on into the lecture. So as I was having this experience, laying on my bed after I'd got back from surfing, not really asleep, in hypnagogic state, all of a sudden I felt this experience that I had had so many times when I was having out-of-body experiences. And suddenly I found myself looking at this, 7 beings. This is an illustration that I did, obviously. Definitely isn't a photograph. But it would have been hard to take a photograph in that craft. But as I was standing there, totally uplifted, I mean, it's like you feel like you're so excited that, your mind is just going to explode. It's just like there was this sense of upliftment. What else can I describe it as? I wasn't fearful at all. This all seemed familiar to me in some ways. And immediately, as I was standing there, just like completely blown away with what I was experiencing, this individual, we got all the technical stuff here. Serena found this for me. See if I can figure out how to use it. Ah, there he is. This individual right here, the blonde hair and the white suit, he immediately began telepathically communicating with me. I mean, this was so vivid, so real, that I can't think of any experience in my life that had more of an impact on me because of the sense of upliftment, the sense that all of my senses were suddenly focused in such an incredibly powerful way on an experience now that was literally blowing my mind, and yet here I am standing there. It's beyond anything that I would have ever believed, and yet there I am. I'm standing right here. This individual is telepathically communicating with me. He began to describe the fact that this is an experience that many people are given, and that it is not because they are special. It is not because, that they are deserving or they're the chosen ones or anything like that. It's just the fact that they're open, and for some other reason, this is something that they need in order to continue on their own pathway and gain a greater understanding of what this means in retrospect now, 30 years later, which since that time, obviously, there's been a tremendous amount of research, of intense mental understanding, and basically trying to comprehend how this experience could take place, and the countless thousands of experiences that have happened since that time. And so these are the individuals who I was standing there communicating with telepathically, something I had never experienced before in any kind of dream state, psychic state, or anything. And he just kind of continued on describing a little bit about the ship. And again, this is like a more direct view of this individual. And I'd never had an experience like this before. I had no idea who these people were, at that point in time. And he began describing to me a little bit about how this craft functioned, how it so-called flew, but he said it doesn't fly. These craft are not aerodynamically designed to fly as the craft that we have, with the different pressure as it exists in the wind speed of the wings. They actually oscillate. They're made of a material that is actually a crystalline nature. It's something like our diamond, only they are able to add certain electromagnetic frequencies to it so that it can actually raise to a much higher frequency than on the electromagnetic spectrum than anything that our scientists are presently aware of. So, this is blowing my mind. I'm not a scientist. I'm fascinated with science, always have been. But still, the information made sense. It was just kind of going in, and it was just kind of like, wow, this is amazing. I just can't believe what I'm hearing. And so he said what basically takes place is that the craft itself, we'll get into this one in a second. The craft itself is, like I had mentioned, made of a crystalline material, and it has a specific generating device that goes through the entire central portion of the starship, from the top to the bottom. And it's full of this plasma, type of plasma that I don't have an understanding of what it was. But he said this particular generating device begins to oscillate with this plasma. This is when the ship is in its so-called physical state, which it does exist in, an atomic state, so that you could see it in a physical way. And as it begins to oscillate with this generating device, it begins to raise the frequency of the craft as a whole, and it begins to actually influence the molecules of this crystalline structure, to where all of the molecules in the craft, including the individuals inside, are stepped up to a much higher frequency that's no longer subjective to the physics as we know it of gravity, momentum, inertia, these particular type of physical effects. And that it's actually oscillating on a higher frequency now. And the one way that I begin to try to comprehend it, this is a very limited perspective of it, but it's something like a radio wave that is able to instantly, just like right now at 186,000 miles per second, radio waves are moving through this room, moving through our bodies, and they're coming from the transmitter, but they're instantaneous in their expression, seemingly at 186,000 miles per second. And yet, the craft itself is able to tune into certain electromagnetic energies that are actually crisscrossing throughout the entire universe, and that those particular frequencies are pitched to a certain orbital plane, and that they're able to tune in to the frequency of that electromagnetic plane, and they're able to actually instantaneously transfer themselves, not unlike what we would call a wormhole, although science obviously is still kind of wrestling with the concept of a wormhole. And not unlike that they can create this particular type of effect and instantaneously ride that wave energy that is in a sort of an orbit with the entire universe, or the galaxy as a whole, the different planets and different solar systems, and so they can travel much faster than the speed of light. Now, this particular information, I would like to term it a science. It's a science of energy that isn't presently accepted, although the scientific community, I think, is more and more getting into a concept that there are these, what you could call, alternate dimensions. And that, in a sense, that's what this craft is doing. It's actually transferring its energy from a physical dimension to an alternate dimension that now can move at speeds beyond the necessary limitations of this physical dimension. And where these individuals are coming from? Well, this is something that came to me later. They did not tell me that they were from the Pleiades. They did not tell me where they were from. They said, as I was speaking with them, they said, well, you wouldn't have any clue, about where we're from. It doesn't really matter. It's not necessary for you to know. You wouldn't relate to it anyway. This is like, in 1978. I really hadn't been involved in UFO. I maybe had watched them on TV, always had something of a rapport. But the understanding since that time has been that there is a tremendous amount of information about more advanced individuals who are utilizing advanced scientific physics and who have both a extremely high developed technological understanding, and that also in unison with a very advanced spiritual understanding. And when I say spiritual, I mean to qualify that with the understanding that that is not necessarily a religious belief system or a philosophy, but it's actually an understanding of a relationship between nature, the expression of life as we see it in every aspect, the regeneration of animals, plants, all of the life forms that we see. These are all expressions of nature in a very scientific way as we're getting more and more knowledgeable about this, and that this is the method and understanding that they had been developing for literally hundreds of thousands and even into millions of years in some of these civilizations. So they were able to bypass the so-called destructive phase of evolution and to move beyond the so-called warlike attitudes. And in that respect, we're able to begin connecting with this nature, which is, in a sense, you could call it the energy of spiritual energy, God force, the fountainhead, whatever way you want to look at it. If you look at it from a religious standpoint, it's God. But it's not necessarily a figurehead. It's actually this energy that is re-expressing itself in an infinite number of forms, human beings being one of them. And the individuals coming from this particular, this star cluster, have developed themselves in a very, very high advanced way. There's a lot of different information about individuals from the Pleiades. Obviously, I think Billy Meier would be the very first one to really make it a major topic in the UFO world and the discussions between people who are interested in these subjects. And, one of the first ones, and I think in many ways, when you have an experience like this, how many people in here have had an experience that would be at least considered paranormal or something unusual, either seeing a UFO or having some sort of experience? So, okay, y'all need to come up and start relating your experiences now, because I'm done. No, just kidding. think I got a little more to say, hopefully. But anyway, so who are these people from the Pleiades? What is the Pleiades? Well, we know it's like a star system that's, 440 light years from Earth, which is roughly over 1 billion miles, something like that. It may even be more than that. Anyway, it's like 135 parsecs, which is the distance to the sun. Multiply that times 93 million times 135. You're all mathematically inclined. I'm sure you can figure that out. And so anyway, the main stars are what they call young, hot blue stars. And actually, the auras that you see around them, they've since discovered that these are dust clouds that are much in front of the actual star system itself, and that they used to think that it was the aura from the star, but it's not. But they know that the stars from the scientific observation are very young, and they wouldn't be stars that would necessarily spawn a civilization that had been lasting for millions of years. But again, what we're talking about here is a very, very large amount of space. We don't have any kind of telescopes that can reach that distance and begin to pull in some of what would be the suns that would be more of the nature of our sun, where evolution and life has been able to develop over a period of billions of years. And so those stars and those suns are definitely out there. There's no doubt in my mind about that. I think scientists are beginning to come to that conclusion themselves. And so some of the main stars, as they're shown here, I won't even read them off, but many of them have Greek names. And if you look back to the cultures throughout history, you'll find in almost every single culture, Indian cultures, Egyptian culture, the Muslim culture, European culture, each one of them, and going back to, wow, this thing's like on its own now, I guess. It got tired of me talking, maybe it's time to change the subject. But anyway, they all have different mythology that's related directly to the Pleiades. And I think it has to do, when you look at the mythology of the past, you'll find that there are grains of truth, strands of truth that are wound into it. And those strands of truth, those individuals from these particular star systems, we can call it the Pleiades, it doesn't really matter so much the name, but that they are individuals who are both, like I said, technologically and spiritually, like totally beyond our comprehension, advanced compared to the average individual living on this planet. In other words, if you could picture maybe an insect, like an ant, and you think, okay, there's an ant, I'll step on him. He's not really, much of a consciousness. And I do like to kill ants, but anyway, that's another story. But that ant has intelligence. We call it instinct, but it's really intelligence. He knows how to continue his life. He knows how to function and live in this group consciousness. And so, in comparison, us to the ant, we could say, okay, these are these individuals living on these more advanced planets compared to us. We would be like ants in a sense, although they wouldn't look down on us because they came from where we're coming from, and they understand that. And so that particular understanding creates a sense of humility to where they don't judge. They live in a different state. It's not emotionally laden with all of the, the hatred, the anger, the fear. They've gotten to a point to where those particular emotions have been put out. Not like, the Vulcans on Star Trek, squelch them, but they've evolved to a level to where those emotions are no longer a part of their expression, and they've been able in that way to continue to attune, in a sense like a radio is attuning to the transmitter, and they can attune to this, what I said, the fountainhead, or this higher consciousness that exists as a form of God, and can in that way express themselves in creative scientific ways that are totally beyond our comprehension. And so, obviously, this particular illustration of the Milky Way galaxy kind of gives us a little perspective on where we're at. Oh yeah, I got to use my technological device here. Hey, there we are. We're on the inside of one of these arms, way out at the end of the galaxy. Now, scientists say that as you get more into the center of the galaxy, it would be impossible for life to exist there. because of the tremendous forces that are in play with everything so close together. How do they know? They've been there? No. But, you know, everybody likes to make known that they have opinions. And what's that? Opinions are like, I don't get into that. But anyway, you know, I'm not going to put down the scientific community because I know that that is such a cornerstone for really understanding truth and reality as we're beginning to discover it. And I think scientists are on the very cutting edge of understanding life in a greater way. They're just a little bit limited by the structure of society and the way that the school systems are built around something of a system that is limited, something like a parrot. In other words, when you go to college, you're given a bunch of information, but you're not really asked to go beyond the limits of what that information is relating to you. You're just asked to remember it, in a sense, and then at the end of the semester, at the end of your stay in college, you are given a diploma, something like a parrot speak, and you can parrot back the information. Now, that's a very limited understanding, in a sense, of what takes place, because many of these individuals are obviously very brilliant, and I really do respect and appreciate science. I'm just more speaking from the standpoint of the limitations that are put on society by people who aren't accepting the fact that things can exist in ways that we don't yet understand, and simply by having an open mind like I had when I was on that island in Puerto Rico, you can experience something that would otherwise be unbelievable to you. In other words, you have to first have the open mind that you're going to let the information in before they can connect with you. Otherwise, it would be a terrifying experience, which also many people have had. Again, this is another understanding that I have had is the nature of these craft and the way that they move, and that they do oscillate with the planetary systems. When they do come into more of a conjunction with a planet, they are utilizing the magnetic properties of the craft and can oscillate either as a positive or a negative pole related to the planet itself as a giant magnet, and can land or depart from any particular point. And that's, you know, the beginning of the departure. And then from there, it becomes, like I was speaking of, the interdimensional aspect, which is why oftentimes these craft will just disappear. You'll see them, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're gone. So what's really taking place is that they've moved out of the range of our particular perception. And a lot of researchers now are being able to photograph them with infrared and with various other phenomenon cameras that are obviously proving that there is things out there that we just can't see with our physical eyes. Now, this particular building here is quite a fascinating thing. You can see it has right here, you probably can't see it very well, but there is like a craft that they have, and they'll live in families of as much as 1,000 people. And this would actually be more of a research center, but it's also their home, because they're all research scientists in different fields, and they work together and are able to move around the planet This would be one of the planets in the Pleiades. This particular building here, as you can see, it's kind of just snuggled into the side of the cliff near a waterfall. Part of the reason for that, in fact, the entire reason for that is because that's the way I painted it. But actually, we all know that waterfalls are very soothing in many different ways, and that there is some evidence that they give off negative ions, which have an uplifting effect on us. You know, something like after a thunderstorm, there's tremendous negative ions that are put out, and that in a sense it kind of tunes us in to a slightly different perception of consciousness. And so this actually is capable of moving. They can levitate this particular structure to anywhere they want on the planet. And so at this particular time, they're enjoying this particular location, but it's just simply a thing that obviously, you know, everybody gets bored living in the same place, although this looks kind of a cool place to live. But they can move around with it. Again, getting a little bit more into the science of what I would call energy and what the more advanced individuals from other planets are aware of and practice in their daily life, we see that these various waveforms of the electromagnetic spectrum go through quite a gamut of different frequencies, the radio being the very large sine waves, and the visible spectrum being a very tiny part of this larger whole, and going on down to the X-ray as they get smaller and smaller, and gamma ray. And obviously, again, we're utilizing this particular aspect of it with our physical senses, and there is a lot more there if we can learn to transcend the limitations of our belief in the reality that this physical dimension is all that exists. And that comes about through a process of research into your own consciousness, into your own mind. And I've been involved deeply in this, as I said. It's literally put me at the edge of sanity, would you say? Thinking that I was losing my mind, when in reality, I was just beginning to see things that were outside the perspective of this particular little tiny patch of information that comes through and that we relate to as our physical experiences. Now, this particular individual, these are all out of that original painting that I did, and they're not very well done. They're mostly just used as, you know, diagrams that I can describe my experiences with. But when I was having the experience that I talked about earlier, it only lasted for about 15 minutes. But near the end of the experience, after, you know, being told about how their craft flew, various things that were relative to a more advanced understanding of life, I began to feel this sense of, the only way that I could describe it is primitive. I felt like, kind of like an ape or something of that nature, standing in relation to these individuals. I could sense or feel that as they were looking at me, they weren't judging me in any way, but it was like they were looking at, you know, a gorilla, an ape, to a certain extent. Somebody who was very, very inferior in every way, and yet had that spark of this infinite potential that everyone has, and so they don't judge. They didn't judge at all. I could feel that. And as I began to sink in my own, you know, going from this tremendous high of being inside this craft, communicating with these people, and the entire lid blown off my whole perception of reality, and so excited with that concept, I began to suddenly realize how different I was, and I began to sink mentally to a point where I was starting to feel very depressed, you know, very, very depressed. Like, oh my God, you know, these people are so advanced. I'm just some moron, you know, and how am I ever going to be able to comprehend, understand, or be able to function? And yet there was a memory in my mind of some connection with these individuals. And so as I sunk down mentally, this particular individual, she didn't communicate with me mentally. She just looked at my eyes. The captain, the guy in the white, who had been communicating with me originally, he looked over at her. She looked over at me, and I felt it was like ray beams of just this pure, loving intelligence going right into my consciousness, right into my mind. And I, again, was totally uplifted. So it was like she gave me a part of her higher consciousness, in a sense, to lift me back up. And at that point, I just started saying over and over again, can I go with you? Can I go with you? You know, take me with you. Take me to your leader, whatever it was to say. And the individual then told me, no, you're not ready to go with us. I understand what he meant much more clearly now. And again, this is the nature of what I perceive as being some of the planetary systems in the Pleiades as they exist. And as the cities, somebody was taking these paintings down into Laguna Beach, this is like about a year or two ago, and they were showing them down there. And somebody was getting really excited about them, you know, something, I can't remember what was going on. It was a friend of mine who was taking them around. And then he came back, you know, and it was like this big, oh my God, you know, they can't take these paintings. They can't, they're Muslim temples, man. We can't have Muslim temples. Nobody wants to buy this stuff. They're not Muslim temples. These buildings, they're built in a particular way for a particular purpose and a reason. They're circular in nature, and they're built on a location that is in direct relationship to the electromagnetic spectrum of the planet as it turns on its axis, a very distinct and definite placement, because it's where the highest charge of energy and the understanding that they have on where to build these things, you know, I guess in astrology we kind of term it astrocartography. Serena would know much more about that than I do. I'm a complete astrology novice, don't know nothing about it. But when I hear them all talking, you know, it all sounds pretty interesting. It's like a different language. But so they know where to build these places, their temples, their cities, so as to gain the greatest amount of actual intelligence coming from these particular electromagnetic energies and their hookup with higher and higher dimensions. So they're actually connected, again, as the transmitter coming from a higher placement on the scale of the evolutionary spiral, is being able to be channeled, in a sense, to these, what you would call the radio itself, and the individuals living there are able to pick up that information and utilize it in their scientific research and in their means of helping other people on other planets, which is really, as they become more advanced, you find they become more and more selfless, and the nature of their life is to help others to develop in their own spiritual path. And I think a lot of times what happens when individuals have experiences, they have valid experiences. And, you know, talking about Billy Meyer, I won't use that as an example. I'm not an expert on that. I have talked to people who have met him and have, you know, everybody's in different positions as far as what is actually taking place or has taken place with his particular experience. But I think oftentimes they are contacting us. We have an experience, and it has such a tremendous impact that our ego or our understanding of the experience begins to get blown out of proportion. We think we're someone special. We think we're supposed to go out and preach to people, or we're the chosen one, or whatever. And of course, that's completely in opposition to what they're trying to teach and what they're trying to relate to people. And so they know they can't contact those people anymore because they've completely gone off the handle. And so then those people will start making stuff up. And so what originated as a real experience suddenly gets turned into something to where the person is no longer valid in what they're speaking about. And I think that's quite common. And the other aspect is, once you have had these contacts to a certain extent, they're not going to keep coming feeding you the pablum of, how to gain knowledge and how to progress yourself. That's something you have to learn through your own inner knowledge. It's something you have to gain through your own research, and nobody can do it for you. They can give you experiences that will help to encourage you and lead you towards a higher purpose, but they can't do it for you. And so that's another reason why they'll stop the contacts that you may have had in different ways. Now, God, what do I do with my water? I don't know what in the heck this is. What does that look like? No, just kidding. This is the diagram, I guess, what you call, of reincarnation. Now, before everybody starts getting up and walking out of the room saying, this guy's nutty, how can you believe in something so crazy as reincarnation? Let me just get into a few little tidbits of information. Everyone has a psychic body. This is something that I've gained in my research since this first experience, obviously. And that psychic body has been known as the soul or the spirit. But what it really is an energy body that consists of all of the various energy waveforms that we have gained as experience through a many lifetime history of our own particular evolution as we've gone through many lifetimes. The people on this planet don't know to a great extent about the fact that they have lived on other planets, and that I think the people who are interested in what we're talking about tonight in UFO studies and understandings are people who have come from other planetary systems. Very often, many of you could have come directly from the Pleiades yourselves. But what can happen is that you can lose your way. And because of the nature of the history that I'll go into a little bit more, which goes back literally 19 million years, as mind-boggling and outrageous of a statement that is, I'll try to back that up with some information that will hopefully make it seem somewhat valid, at least from my own perspective and the experiences that I've had. So we do go through these cycles of reincarnation. It's something that is totally well known in the civilizations on the higher developed planets in the Pleiadian constellation. It's not a constellation, the star system that these individuals are coming from, more advanced star travelers. And they have utilized it as a way of developing themselves spiritually so that they don't continually have to rehash the various negative energy waveforms that have developed in their psychic bodies as shocks, blocks, being involved in warfare, those kind of things that we all have, at least I have very distinctly, and I have very clear memories from when I was 19 years old. In my sleep state, I started having these incredible battles, and I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but just to try to give a little background of my own experience, I did realize at that time that I was beginning to have memories from my past lives come back to me, and I had been a warrior. I was one of the conquistadors who went to help to destroy the Inca civilization. You say, well, God, how could you be involved in that kind of horrendous activity and still be trying to stand up and speak as somebody who hopefully has a positive message to relate to people? And I can only say from that is that it's the understanding of those energy waveforms as not being good or bad, positive or negative, but as being simply the debris that is now existing in the psychic body that can be worked out, that can be released. You can be healed of that information and literally spiritually advanced along the pathway to a point to where it's no longer going to affect you. You're not going to go back and become that same negative character again. But that's the choice we all make on a daily basis. So reincarnation is something that obviously can't be proven in a scientific way, although there is some pretty fascinating instances. I believe there was a young boy, of course the Dalai Lamas and the Tibetan beliefs, are chosen because they can have memories and they can come back and describe certain situations that only those individuals who had been the Dalai Lama in a previous lifetime would know. And there's other instances of people who have, in a sense, validated the reality of reincarnation. We had 53 people who helped to write a book called Atahualpa, which was the Inca leader at the time when Pizarro went down with the conquistadors. I was an individual in that time, at that period in time, known as Antonio Ruiz, and I was the ship's captain for the conquistadors. And so, wow, now how did that happen? I think it's trying to speed me up here. Yeah, okay, I better speed up. So anyway, that reality of that lifetime having had such a negative effect on me, as I went back and looked at it objectively and accepted the reality of what I had done, who I had been, what my experiences were, I began to have tremendously powerful healings where I was being actually, the very frequency of your psychic body, that energy body, that spirit, is raised up as these lower frequencies are no longer able to affect you. Because that higher frequency is now oscillating on a slightly higher level. And so this is the psychic body that I was speaking of. These are all the energy waveforms as they exist. And each one of these is both recreating the physical body, represents that. So in a sense you could say, this is the transmitter, and what we see as the physical body, that's the picture on the television screen. So, you see these pictures, you watch the movies on television. If you didn't know about a TV, well, I don't know how many people really know how a TV works. I mean, the technology on our planet is way in advance of the understanding of the average person, which is a dangerous thing. When you get involved with nuclear weapons, where you just got to push a few buttons. But that particular picture is the transmission from this psychic body. So that's what we're seeing, this physical body. The psychic body is something that's enveloping us all the time. And as it raises up in frequency, the physical body responds and is also raised up in frequency, and it becomes much more sensitive to various aspects of what you would call the paranormal or the psychic world. And in a sense, you're walking a finer line in your expression of life, and the world doesn't look the same to you as it used to. And so it can be something of a challenging experience to begin to work these things out, and yet it's the way to progress in the way that they do on these other higher developed planets. And this goes into it in a little more in-depth way. I'll just maybe read a little bit of it. Is this microphone picking me up? Probably.
No, you don't have to
Stay there.
You didn't take it off the stand.
Oh, there we go. See, you learn something new every day. What can I say? So you can see the brain is not the receiver, not the thinking mechanism. The true transmitter and generating source is the psychic body. The aura is an electromagnetic field that radiates several feet from the body. The chakras are the energy centers that serve as a sprinkler system, distributing cosmic energy from the psychic anatomy. Obviously this is kind of a depiction of the chakras. I got too many devices here. here, here, and here. Those are energy centers, that I'm really not that familiar with, and I'm not going to go into because I don't think it's that important. But what is important is that we all have a higher self. We all have a lower self. The subconscious is all the memories that we've had throughout the physical lifetimes that we've lived. And the higher consciousness is the experiences that have been polarized, that we've been able to contain as positive learning experiences. And that is the guidance, that's the intuition that we can pick up on, and that guides us if we're able to tune into it. And obviously, we can only tune into it when we're developing ourselves in some kind of creative, inspiring way. And so that kind of gets into the whole aspect of how to tune in. If you have a question of how to tune in to this higher consciousness, do something creative, do something selfless, do something to help humankind as a whole, and that'll be a direct connection to this higher consciousness, because that's the frequency that it functions on. And so the negative experience from past lives, shocks, traumas, they exist as negative waveforms within the psychic body. And those are the things that we have to heal ourselves of. And so we have the mental consciousness that is all the different experiences that we have from out a period of many different lifetimes, and the subconscious, which in each lifetime we develop, and that kind of contains the instincts and those things that maintain a sense of ego so that we can carry on some kind of intelligent life. But we don't remember any of these other energies. Very few people do from the past lives, because it's simply too much information. Obviously, it's got to come in just in increments, a little bit at a time. Otherwise, it would just blow your mind. It already has blown my mind many times, but here I am up here speaking, so I hope I don't sound like I've been totally blown out. This is just another example of a close-up of what I was describing before as being the various types of homes that they live in, which are really research centers. And these people aren't, sitting back watching TV, kicking back, drinking beer, and watching football, and those are the kind of things that I do. But so they're not like me. But actually, they're involved in such a much more positive expression of life, creativity, inspiration, all of these various aspects of learning how to gain higher knowledge that they can share with others in a positive way is really the focus of their lives. And using spaceships to go out and research other planets, and coming to this planet specifically, as I related earlier, because the people on this planet had lived on some of these planets, and they have a history in which these individuals had gone out from the Pleiades and had gotten lost in some of the worlds, such as our planet, mainly planet Earth. If you look at it, it's something of a, it's not something, it's, you just read the newspaper and you think you are in hell. People are so afraid of hell, and you just look out and you go, my God. Of course, there's different levels of hell. Some people are ready to blow their brains out in the same room. Somebody could be sitting there, ecstatic and just as happy as can be. Like Serena, she has nothing ever to worry about. She's just, well, no, she does, but she doesn't think she does. But anyway, so that's an example of the way that they live and the reasons why they are involved in this creative, inspirational research, and how we, each one, in our own desires and efforts to connect with that, begin to develop our own connection with that higher consciousness, and we gain tremendous information and knowledge that we would not have gained otherwise. Okay, this is just a map of Puerto Rico. Give a little bit of background information about where I was. Down here, Rincon, that's basically the city that I was in at the time. If we go over here, Serena may have had this on a description that she gave earlier. And El Yunque is a place where there's a tremendous amount of experiences that people have had with UFOs and with USOs also, and also in the Rincon area down to the Boquerón area. There's a lighthouse out here. Thousands of people have had observations of craft coming in and out of the ocean here, going into this Lake Cartagena. It's actually not on this map. It's a very small lake. And So whether that had anything to do with the reason I had my experience, I don't know, back in 1978. But I believe that right off this coast, having this tremendously intense, deep trench, the Puerto Rican Trench, that there are some things that go on there that are beyond our present understanding. Now this is just a photo that, you know, I mean, everybody kind of has the concept of orbs. I'm sure, how many have taken pictures and seen these things in their own experiences with cameras? Just one? Well, as you can see, it happens all the time. Now, the interesting thing about this, are they just light flares on water? Are they just, you know, flares that are coming up off of the moisture in the air? I don't know for sure. I don't know. But I know we took a picture right after this, about 2 minutes later, and there wasn't one of these things in the picture. So why they all of a sudden appeared, you know, I don't know. But Serena took that picture, and I thought it was interesting because there was so darn many of these suckers flying around there. It just almost blanked me out. I don't look particularly intelligent in that picture, though. Okay, here is, well, you probably all know the one on the far right. That wind-blown hair. She didn't want me to use this picture. My hair is all blown out. Don't use that picture. But this is actually the street leading up to the house where I was living in when I had my experience. I was staying there for like 2 months. We'd rented a house, just a little shack. You know, you don't need any insulation. It's tropical. It's warm all the time. Now there's like $1 million house right up there, and everything else is like completely gone except for these giant $1 million homes. So, you know, we can stock that up to progress for people like me who go out and build big custom homes all over the place, destroy the environment, kill the trees. Hey, you know, what else can I do? I got to make a living. Well, that was tricky. And this is obviously just another depiction of, again, the way that they build their cities. You'll see a lot of water in my paintings because I have a rapport with the ocean from many years of surfing. And as I look back into the history of my own past, I've found that I had been very involved in the water, as I mentioned, ship's captains and actually pirates. And I had been a pirate many times and had some experiences relative to what it feels like to sneak up on the deck. A very, very vivid experience in dream state. And literally with a knife in my teeth, sneaking up and cutting somebody's throat. And the feeling of that, what it feels like from an energy perspective, you know, it's horrible beyond your wildest imagination. But those are the kind of things that I have expressed in my past and have caused me tremendous negative repercussions. Yet now, as I can look at them and understand them, accept them as a positive learning experience, they no longer affect me in that negative way. I mean, I could have never came up here and spoken like this years ago if any of you knew me. Neither was I an artist. He described it a little bit beforehand. But when I came back from Puerto Rico in 1979, I had no relationship to creativity, artistic expression, inspiration. You know, I like to surf. That was my connection with nature, so to speak. But, you know, I was involved in all kinds of negative activities. And when I got back, I suddenly had this desire, this intuitive, you know, desire hit me one morning when I woke up to draw a starship. And as I started drawing it, I felt that same type of energy that I related when I was taken aboard the craft. In other words, it was a sense of being uplifted into almost a different atmosphere of awareness to where everything was beginning to look incredibly beautiful, and there was a sense of peace and excitement. You know, it wasn't like a nirvana type thing where you just sit around and float on a cloud. It was like activity. I wanted to do things, and so I started painting. And so this is a product probably 15 years later of having been involved in art and painting. And there really isn't much of a future in UFO painting. I don't want to discourage anybody, but from my own experience, don't quit your day job if you are involved in painting. I'm definitely not going to quit mine. So as you can see, the cities again are developed in such a way that they are able to literally focus the electromagnetic energies so that the highest amount of intelligence can be brought in, as I mentioned earlier, in a sense like the radio from bringing it in from the transmitter. And as we can see back in the back here, the way that they actually gain the energy for their civilizations is very similar to what has been described by Nikola Tesla and the power towers that he was beginning to develop and build during the, I believe it was the Second World War in Colorado Springs. And his understandings were very relative to this much more advanced science that these individuals are utilizing on their planets, and I can pretty much say that he was one of those more advanced intellects. Whether he came from the Pleiades or not isn't really important. What is important is that he was a very, very advanced individual, and he brought in information in such a way that I don't think it's been duplicated to this day, that somebody can just have a working knowledge of alternating current because of some experience that he had when he saw the lightning go off and this tremendously powerful impact that it had on him, and he went and drew it in the sand, the working device of an alternating current generator. And as we all know, that's what lights our planet today. So there's a reason why individuals like that have that kind of ability and knowledge, and it's related to the fact that they already had it before they came in, and it was from having had that development in planets such as this, and even more developed planets, maybe even in higher dimensions. And this is going into the understanding of an interplanetary confederation, and that, from my understanding, is that the individuals on this particular planet, it's called Planet Vixal, it's in the Pleiadian star system again, and it is a universal structure where individuals from many, many different planets, something like our United Nations, can come together and can share ideas and can work with each other in a positive way. And obviously, the technology and development that they utilize is something that would be truly inspiring for us to be able to become a part of, and that we could, if enough people in our world would step up to that more peaceful belief that we're not here to conquer, we're not here to be fearful of our, neighbors across the ocean or wherever they may be, but that we're here to gain knowledge and understanding and learn how we can someday be ambassadors for this higher intelligence and help other people to gain their own connection with their higher consciousness and their higher self. So this is actually an interplanetary confederation building that is utilized for this purpose. Tremendous, tremendous advanced. They would be masters on our world. They would be so advanced, each one advanced scientists. And they can get together in a cooperation, a spirit of cooperation, and help each other with problems that may crop up and that do crop up on many of the other planets that they're associated with. Now, if we go back into the history of our planet a little bit more, again, we would find that there have been civilizations that have existed where there was space travel and that they were very advanced. How do I know this? I'm just making it up. No. Excuse me. I know this because I've had direct experiences and memories that came to me because of my research and because of the fact that I was so interested to know. And directly related to this particular civilization, which is Atlantis, it would have been one of the colonies of Atlantis. They were actually inspired and initiated by advanced teachers who had come from the Pleiades and starships when the individuals on our planet at that time were in a much more primitive state. And they contacted those individuals who had been part of their civilization previously and who didn't have the very negative past history. And so an individual known as Poseid was actually contacted by these individuals on a starship, an individual known as Maitreya, who was a very advanced teacher, has lived on this planet I think only several times, but he actually took this Poseid, who's capable of making a tremendously quick evolutionary step by going on their craft, and he was actually stepped up in his frequency to the point where he could be a director for the other people, the primitive individuals, because now he was one of them and they saw him as one of them, and he was their leader at that time. And he was able to begin to develop the spiritual civilization of Atlantis, which actually goes back in history probably about 50,000 years when it was first initiated, and ended something around 15,000 years ago. And the civilization of Egypt had a continuity with the teachers of Isis and Osiris, who were actually individuals. Again, mythology that has very definite facets of truth in it. If you look within yourself and see that diamond and rotate it around, you'll begin to see that there's a lot there that we just simply have forgotten about. And so, again, the civilization was built very similarly to the civilizations in the Pleiades. In the same way, the buildings and the structures were placed in such a location that they could contact a higher frequency, and the individuals who were the more advanced teachers lived in the temples, which were extremely high frequency, and those who were just still developing lived in outlying areas and were the gardeners and the farmers, and they were also developing positively. And as we don't all know, but what basically took place is over a period of time, many thousands of years, the development that had taken place went through that cycle of the historical rise and fall of civilizations. Of Atlantis was eventually destroyed, mainly because the people could not continue the progressive motion, and they began to regress. And so the Pleiadians, as they existed at that time, had to leave. They could not, it was like they're not going to force themselves on us. They cannot do that. It goes against everything they know. They can only help to show us the way, and we have to follow, and we have to become the teachers ourselves. Okay, everybody's familiar with this guy. So I'm getting into a little bit of some of the individuals who have existed on our planet, who in their own past had been associated with individuals from higher planets. And again, if we go to the psychic body and we stick to what I would call a scientific understanding of the way that it works, individuals like Einstein come into this world with tremendously advanced intelligence. And that is something that they had developed previously. And there's a reason why they have this genius proclivity. It's already in their psychic, and they have to find a way to express it. And as they express it, they're connecting with their true purpose. And so in a scientific vein, Einstein would be one of those individuals who had come and had lived on these more advanced planets, and then again came to planet Earth at this particular time to help to continue the scientific understanding and the tremendous advancement that we have experienced in the last 100 years. I mean, look at the last 100 years. The evolution of science is just beyond belief. It's so staggeringly more rapid than it had been at any previous time. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. Interesting. He was a scientist. Of course, we have to talk about Nikola Tesla a little bit here. Obviously, a genius of the highest caliber, able to, as we related earlier, create devices from start to finish without any necessity to do the experimentation, although he did do a tremendous amount of experimentation, talked about communicating with other planets. Many of the things, they were maybe on the periphery of reality in the sense that he wasn't making a direct connection with those things, but he knew that they existed, and he had an open mind to it, and he was obviously way ahead of his time. And again, an individual who is an example of somebody who already had this intelligence. Where else would it come from? You know, it's not just an object of the evolution of a physical body. There's got to be something more to that mind being so much more advanced and capable than the average individual. Another person like, say, Mozart, you know, is able to produce this incredible music at an incredibly young age, the age of 6 or 7. Where's he able to get that information? How can he have that advancement, that mastery at such a young age? Well, he had it previously, and he brought it with him when he came in. And he came into a musical family and was able to, in that way, to have encouragement and to be able to develop that musical inspiration in a way that it could, you know, really last throughout the ages, which it has up to this time. Although if you're into rap and punk rock, you probably don't listen to Mozart very much. Again, Einstein with his incredible Tesla coil, I believe is what this one is, and generating this incredible high-frequency energy and proving that it was a very natural thing and that it wasn't dangerous. I don't think I'd sit there, even though I knew it, even if I knew that it wasn't dangerous. But obviously, these individuals, they lived their life according to their beliefs. They didn't speak out one side of their mouth and do something else. They spoke truth. They spoke from their heart. And oftentimes, they were the ones who were the most sought out and attempted to be destroyed by individuals whose ego was being deflated and who felt inferior, and that the inferiority that these individuals brought out in them caused them to attack these type of people. There's many throughout history have experienced this, who brought a more advanced understanding and were treated in the most horrendous ways, and by people like me, who were very limited in their understanding, and now I'm beginning to gain that understanding again, hopefully. Again, a very close depiction of what I would claim is some of the actual technology of Atlantis and the way that the ships were able to utilize the energy from these Tesla towers, and something like a Ford generator, the rotating coil, as the Earth rotates on certain electromagnetic lines with the right contacts and the right pickups, it can actually begin to generate tremendous energy. You put, and as we all know, in Tesla's time, he had described that he could build one of these towers, he could put this energy into the atmosphere, and that all you would need is an antenna on your car, your vehicle, whatever it might have been, and you could tap into this energy for free. And he was more than happy to have done that. But the powers to be at that time did not think that was a good idea, because they would literally lose their ability to dominate society through the financial markets. We all know that that's gone on and is going on to this very day. I think it was J.P. Morgan who was backing Tesla up to a certain point, until he no longer was getting the money-making devices that he wanted, and Tesla was trying to go off in another direction, and he just dropped him. Leonardo da Vinci, another example of somebody who had this tremendous scientific understanding, of the laws and the principles of physics, so ahead of his time, and also a true, incredible artist. And his artistry was something that was a offshoot of his understanding of science and the understanding of perception. And that as we look out and we see things, that there's specific physical laws that are in motion, and that we actually are seeing illusions in the sense that as you do a painting on a piece of canvas, like some are up here, it has a particular sense of reality to it, and yet it's just dabs of color, pigment on a canvas, and yet when you put it all together in a specific way, it suddenly makes a specific object of recognition that we understand and we see as something that is carrying positive information. And that's the reason for the paintings that I attempt to do, is that powerful positive information that I had felt when I was in that craft, and as I continued to paint, it's an energy that I would like to think anyway is going into those paintings in a sense, in a way that you can't really see, but people can feel it. And I've had many people come up to me and go, wow, I've seen that in my dream states. I've experienced that in my dream states, just like that painting. And so that's my purpose for doing these, is to try to, in a sense, share what I've gained from my experiences so that other people may feel a connection in their own way, follow their own positive pathway, and find a way to connect in the way that I have to a certain extent. So Leonardo obviously is another example of somebody who came in with the knowledge already, had been somebody who had lived on these higher developed planets, and came here specifically to help to teach the people at that time. And now here's a painting that I actually was asked to do by an individual I'd met at the Bay Area UFO Expo. And his concept was that, hey, you know what, Moses actually saw this burning bush, but it was really, why couldn't it have been a UFO that was behind the bush projecting this light? There was actually something of a psychic vision that he saw. And, hey, he paid me to make it, so what the hell? I just said, sure, I'll do it. And so that's what this is trying to depict, Moses in the burning bush, and he's getting zapped by this higher intelligence. And of course, then he went off and started this religion behind it all, which we talked about that a little bit earlier. To have an experience, that don't mean you're supposed to go out and think you're now the chosen one and teach everybody how to, live their life, when in reality, you haven't learned how to do it yourself. And of course, this is a little blurry. It was taken from a pretty small picture, but it's Mary Magdalene. Again, a lot of information has come out, especially recently, about Jesus and Mary Magdalene in the special that they had on the Discovery Channel, which was pretty unusual for the Discovery Channel to have something so controversial. But the history reveals that so-called Mary Magdalene was a very advanced teacher, and who was one of the, not so much the disciple, but the actual polarity or the biocentric of Jesus, in a sense, that she also had a much higher frequency and was able to oscillate with him in a positive way. And after his death, she carried on, and they have a tremendous amount of writings that she did that later was taken out, because at that time women were allowed to be spiritual teachers or to be involved in religious studies, but later on it became very much chauvinistic, and women were completely cut out, and then it became that she was this prostitute, and how much of that is true, I really have major doubts. Socrates, another individual who I believe came from more advanced planets such as the Pleiades, and was somebody who really stood up to the very end for truth. And that's the kind of compunction that these individuals have. They will rather go to their death in a physical way because they know that the physical body is simply a vehicle gaining experience, and that the importance is showing people that the life, the energy, the intelligence continues on after the physical death, and they're not afraid to prove that. It's like 9:30. What time do we usually clear out of here? Oh, okay. Jesus Christ. I don't know if I can talk that long. This is a really blurry picture, but what it is, a picture of Hatshepsut. Is anybody familiar with Hatshepsut, Queen Hatshepsut from Egypt? Barbara? Please give me a little dialogue on Queen Hatshepsut, Barbara. No, I won't put you on the spot. She was obviously somebody who, again, very advanced in that she had built this incredible city for the Egyptians at that time. She was the mother of Akhenaten, who I don't have a picture of. I'm sorry, she wasn't the mother of Akhenaten. Queen Tai was the mother of Akhenaten. Hatshepsut was someone who came later and who was the only female Egyptian pharaoh in history. And how could that be? How could a female become something that had never been allowed before? And it was because she was very advanced in her understanding and had been somebody who had came again from these higher dimensions, and specifically from the Pleiades, and had experiences on these more advanced worlds, and that they come at certain times in history and become leaders of civilizations as a way of trying to help the Earth to progress itself again out of the depths of darkness that it has fallen into so many times. So I hope I'm not getting too much off the subject here. Okay, now this individual, this is a depiction of an individual, not a very good one. There's actually other ones this is one taken from the craft, but there was an individual named Delos. He was what you would call the original teacher from the Pleiades. He came with 200 other associates on a craft that was incredibly advanced compared to the craft and compared to the technology of the civilization that he went to visit. The mission that they went on was one of trying to turn around the horrendous history that had been in play when somebody begins to use their own advanced development in a negative way and begins to reverse it. An individual on this particular planet that they went to was called Tyrantus. He actually had went through the process of moving, instead of continuing on a positive spiral to higher and higher development, higher and higher consciousness, this individual Tyrantus had reversed himself and had found himself on this world, in a sense, in a microsecond, materialized a body thinking that he could help this particular planet that was going into an ice age, and the people were going to build a device that was going to actually destroy the entire population at that time. He was on a much more advanced planet looking down, and they were helping to guide these various planets, beginning more in their beginning evolution. And so his desire to go down specifically and to interfere was brought out to him by the advanced individuals on this planet who were living with him. He didn't listen to them. He decided he could do this himself. He found himself on this planet with all this incredible intelligence and knowledge. He helped them reduce this ice age, became the hero at that time, and began a devolution. This was actually 19 million years ago when he went down to this planet, began this devolution, and after countless millions of years of having fallen from a much more developed, higher state, now all that intelligence that he had gained was now being utilized for negative purposes. He still had it. He didn't know where it was coming from anymore, and he was no longer using it for selfless purposes. It actually became a completely controlled planet that was computerized, and that every individual on this particular planet, it was actually more than one planet. The main planet, Tyron, was one of over 100 planets that were part of this system, is in the Orion Nebula, which is really what the Earth is part of, the Orion Nebula in a sense. And he had taken a lot of individuals with him when he had made his fall who were connected to him in a resonant way. In other words, they were helping him beforehand, and now they were attracted with him, and they became the leaders on these planets. And with this advanced intelligence and technology that they developed, They had everyone completely under control, only believed in the physical nature of life, even though their technology was super totally advanced from anything we can understand. The computer system controlled everyone, not unlike 1984, very similar, only much, much more advanced. And Delos, having seen with his brothers on these higher planets the horrible nature of the destruction of the various souls on these other planets, over 100 planets had been taken over by this particular leader, and they could live for 300 or 400 years, 500 years in one body because they had regeneration chambers. I know it sounds like science fiction, but believe me, more intelligent people than me have talked that science fiction really, if you live long enough, becomes science fact. Or if you're able to go back far enough in your understanding and memory, you'll see that a lot of the so-called mythology that we know and we utilize is really based on factual people and factual experiences that have taken place through hundreds and millions of people. And so this individual, Delos, totally selfless in his desire to go help this particular civilization and all of the other planets, was actually, after a short period of time, imprisoned in a computer prison that was built on specific frequencies, and he was literally in every way trying to be brought down to a lower state of consciousness. And this did not happen with him, but the other 200 who came with him all fell to the tremendous, powerful nature of the physical life of this Orion civilization. It was so powerful. They were now being, even though they were 7.5 feet tall, absolutely selfless in every aspect of their expression, totally in tune with this creative intelligence that we've been speaking about, they began to regress because now the people were telling them how great they were, and they began to feel that sense of a lower ego begin to infiltrate in. And you're always, going to be tested, and the choices you make as you develop into a higher and higher. Oh, somebody's really interested here, I can tell. He's probably dreaming about this right now. And so that particular understanding that he was trying to bring to this world was in opposition to everything that they expressed on this particular world. And so, although he was never brought down in his consciousness, he reincarnated throughout history, throughout this night. Actually, this was about 1 million years ago that he had come to this planet, the planet Tyron. And a lot of the individuals from that planet ended up on planet Earth and are running around here today, myself included. And he has, in a sense, contacted us again, to those who are able to, in a sense, sense the reality of his presence in a way. And his other 200 teachers who had come with him had all fallen and had regressed and had become basically similar to the individuals on the planets of Orion, and began incarnating into that civilization and had lost their memory and became very destructive in their own expression in a way, more so than the younger souls, because they had this development. Now they had this tremendous guilt because they knew they were going against what they had already learned. So it's like once you know something is right and you go against it, it's a much greater sense of karmic circumstance than if you're just going through your younger soul and you're just going through your learning experiences. And so that this particular individual was over 1 million year history incarnating into this planet, trying to advance the understandings that he had originally brought to Tyron and to Tyrantus, and that the individual Tyrantus has now also been finally touched to the point where in this particular age, the 21st century, he was able to make his own contact and to begin to reduce the negative effects that he had on so many billions of people. And that's a 19 million year history that goes back far beyond my memories, but I do have memories actually living in this civilization. And they came in dream state, but they were so powerful. I would get up in the morning, I would look at my computer screen, kind of like what I do now, only now I always look for surf report first. Okay, what's the surf doing? even though I really can't surf anymore. I like to think I can still. But anyway, so I'll look at the computer screen. That's what I did at that point in this history and this memory that I had. And the computer had these symbols on it, and it gave me a certain amount of information of what I was to do for that particular day. And that's how everyone was controlled directly through this computer, thinking they were doing the right thing. And it would find your weakness and cause you to, in a sense, become more dependent on that particular computer, whether it would be, you could call it religion, you could call it the material aspect of life, believing that's all that exists. And this is Alta, space scientist from the planet Vixal. I had some paintings of some of the buildings as they exist on this planet Vixal. And again, somebody who has come in this day and age with a tremendous amount of information about an interplanetary confederation that is being and has been set up, and that our planet is invited to join. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but we have been invited, and it's a matter of enough people making that step and desiring to do so. So all of the history, the information that I've been relating, I think, in a sense, I validated it to myself through my own experiences and my own expressions. So what I want to do now is go down just and show you like a 4-minute clip of some of the things that I've been doing in the past 15 years since I began realizing that I did have a much more positive aspect of myself that I hadn't been in touch with. Of course, that's my creative side. Again, relating, I had never been inspired. I had no knowledge of inspiration. I had no desire to express myself creatively. And all of a sudden, it just starts kicking in. And as I said earlier, you're connecting with that transmitter. And through that process, this information can come through, and you can express it in ways that you never would have believed possible. And it's the same for everyone. It's not something that's, like I said before, special people, chosen people, or whatever. It's just you got to have the desire to want to do it. And as you do it, you get back in tune with that creative source. And so everything is a matter of attunement. We're always attuning our minds to some specific frequency, whether it's the lower emotional frequencies, or whether it's the higher, more inspired, inspirational frequencies. That's a choice we make on a daily basis, and that choice determines how our future is going to develop. And if it's inspired, if it's creative, if it's for a positive purpose in the sense of helping others, then that future is progressing. And if it's going in the opposite direction, regressing, then that's, again, the karmic burden that we have to bear, and we'll continue to have to bear it for some time. So let me click on this other little clip real quick, and then we'll open it up for questions. I hope everybody has lots of questions to ask, because I know I covered a lot of information, made a lot of outrageous statements, and put me to task and slam me up to the wall and say, oh, how do you know all this stuff anyway? But again, as I'm saying, this is just stuff that I've validated for myself. Being an extremely skeptical person, it's really surprising that I was somebody who even was able to begin to open my mind to the reality, but it has taken place. So let me put on this other clip. It takes about 4 or 5 minutes, and it's very quick. And it's kind of the validation, so to speak, of my experiences. Hopefully I can get it to play on there. And then we'll have open it up for questions.
Doug, thanks so much for coming. And support Doug. Buy his book.